Hi everyone, welcome to video number 4 in our functional breathing mini course. Today we are continuing our conversation of breathing mechanics with something actionable that you can practice with me right away. I'm going to be sharing with you a special myofascial stretch specifically designed for your diaphragm. If you missed the earlier videos in this series, you can find the link for the entire playlist in the video description. If you're new to the channel, my name is Tara Bianca and I am a longtime holistic health practitioner and functional breathing coach. I'm calling this a myofascial stretch, but this is not an aggressive movement at all. So this is not going to be anything like when you take a yoga strap and wrap it around your foot and then yank your leg way back over your head in an attempt to stretch your hamstrings. This is going to be something very gentle and subtle, and yet I'm hoping that you're going to get this wonderful sense of lengthening through the body and that it will be incredibly calming to your nervous system. Why are we doing this? You know that awareness is always the first step with anything that you are trying to change or improve. So we are doing this stretch so that you can gain more awareness of this area of your body and also a better sense of how your diaphragm is integrated with the rest of your body. Before we jump into the actual stretch, I think a few images are going to be really helpful here just to strengthen your mind-body connection. I think if you're able to better visualize what's happening inside your body, you're going to get a lot more benefit from this stretch. First, I want to look at the more superficial connections. So here we have what we refer to as the V of the back and the Y of the chest. The things I want you to notice here are that your pec major and your lats basically have the same insertion point on your humerus, and this is a major point of connection and integration of your upper limb with your trunk all the way down into your pelvis, which then connects into your legs. So you can see that your lats move from your arms and travel down the back, making this beautiful V shape. And then the tip of that V results in your thoracolumbar fascia, which is a thick, multi-layered area of connective tissue right over your sacrum, which then veers off into the glutes and down into your legs. And then on that front view, you can see your pec major also moves from your arms and travels inward towards your sternum. So that's sort of the mouth of the Y, which then travels straight down toward your pubic symphysis and veers off down the legs. And notice that whether we look at this from the front or from the back, these superficial connections have to travel through this diaphragmatic space. And so I'm bringing this up because when we go to do our stretch, we're going to use our arm as leverage to put a drag simultaneously through the front and the back of the body. And realize that some of you are going to get stuck. So when I move my arm in any direction, either out to the side, up and down on a diagonal, I want to immediately feel it start to pull and connect into my torso and down into my pelvis. But some of you are not going to feel anything. So this reminds me of when I still had my practice in Manhattan, my private practice. I'm just thinking about having one of my clients lying on their backs on my table, totally relaxed, and maybe I go to take their arm and just gently traction back. What I want to see when I pull on their arm gently is an immediate response through the torso all the way down to the pelvis. So I'd like to see their pelvis gently coming with me when I'm rocking their arm, tractioning their arm. And then ideally, I'd like to see that connection go all the way down to the foot. And I'd like to see even some gentle foot movement as I'm gently tractioning their arm. So I really want to see this perfect integration through the entire kinetic chain from the arm all the way down to the foot. But I have a number of cases in my head right now where that is not at all what happened. So imagine now I go to traction someone's arm and there is no movement on the table whatsoever. There is zero integration of this arm with their body. Nothing is moving. It's like their arm isn't even attached to the rest of them. So this is a big issue because it shows that there is a blockage somewhere and there is a total lack of integration between what's happening in the limbs and what's happening in the torso. And so when we're talking about this idea of awareness and integration, you know, there's a point at which no amount of yanking and tugging or tractioning or stretching is going to get you anywhere at all. At some point, you have to start to create that shift internally inside your own body in order to expand, in order to find more length, and in order to really integrate these fascial and kinetic chains in the body. And more importantly, if your body is really comfortable in that limitation of having an arm that is completely operating separately from the rest of the body, if you're comfortable with that movement limitation, you're also going to have to do a lot of work to get your brain to put down its guard. Because in some respects, this is a defense mechanism. You're kind of blocking your perception from even accepting this arm back into the hole. So it's going to take some work to re-educate your brain so that your brain can say, it's okay. It's safe to move differently, right? It's safe to allow this arm to reintegrate with the whole. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to create this awareness and this integration from the inside out? We're obviously going to use our breath, right? We're going to get the diaphragm to move in a very specific position in order to create that sense of safety in the body. Because remember, that sense of safety is really coming from your autonomic nervous system, and your breath is one of the fastest ways to hack into that autonomic nervous system. And this is also going to allow us to feel the integration of all of these parts. Next, I want to take a quick look at the crura of the diaphragm. So these are basically the ligamentous attachments of your diaphragm onto your lumbar spine. And what I really want you to take note of is how your diaphragm is anchored to your lumbar spine. There's some variability here from person to person, but in general, the right cru of the diaphragm can connect as low as your L4 vertebra. And then the left cru always tends to attach one vertebra higher, so maybe as low as L2 or L3. The point here is that the position of your lumbar spine, which by extension has to encompass the position of your pelvis, hugely impacts whether or not your diaphragm can get enough leverage to actually do its job. And we talked about that a lot in the last two videos. Next, I want to point out the arcuate ligaments of your diaphragm, which are two tendinous arches which make space for and surround your psoas and your QL. So that's your quadratus lumborum. So your psoas is a super powerful hip flexor, and your QL is a strong, deep back muscle, both of which, again, have an enormous influence on the position of your pelvis. So this, again, is to just point out how your diaphragm is very directly connected to these muscles that influence your pelvic position, your posture, your movement patterns, your ability to generate force, etc. I want to look at a few more images and then we'll get into our stretch. Let's look at our 3 hiatuses that go through the diaphragm. So hiatus is just a fancy word for opening. All the major highways of your body have to travel through your diaphragm. So first we have the caval opening. This is the hole through which your inferior vena cava travels, and it is responsible for returning all the deoxygenated blood from your lower body back to your heart. Then we have the esophageal hiatus, through which your esophagus travels and also through which your vagus nerve travels. So this is a really critical area of influence where your diaphragm directly interfaces with your vagus nerve, impacts your ability to get into a parasympathetic response, and affects your digestion. So those of you struggling with GERD and acid reflux, this is often not an acid problem. This is often a weakness in your diaphragm itself, preventing the diaphragm from acting like an actual sphincter to close off the esophagus and prevent the contents of your stomach from rising up. And then third, we have the aortic hiatus, through which your aorta travels, responsible for bringing blood to your entire body, and through which your thoracic duct also travels. That's the biggest lymphatic vessel in your body, responsible for cleaning and draining 75% of the lymph from your entire body. These are all super important structures impacting circulation, lymphatic drainage, immune response, autonomic nervous system response, digestion, and much more. And how you are breathing and using your diaphragm impacts all of them. And lastly, I want to take a look at the internal organs of the abdominal cavity and the chest cavity. So here, I simply want you to notice how your diaphragm is at the center of all of it. Look at how your diaphragm divides your torso into compartments. So the word diaphragm literally translates to something like the fence that travels through something or the fence that separates something. In this case, your thoracic diaphragm is separating your chest cavity from your abdominal cavity and having a massive influence on every single one of those organs with every single breath that you take. Okay, that's just a very small taste, believe it or not, but I think it's more than sufficient for today to get the point. Your diaphragm is implicated in every aspect of your being, in every system of your body. And so I just want you to consider these connections a little bit as we head into our stretch. Okay, so let's start by lying on the left side. We're gonna do the stretch on the right side first. So go ahead and find a comfortable spot on the floor. You're gonna lay down on your left side, and let me just make sure we can see. Okay. And now if this is uncomfortable for you, go ahead and feel free to get a pillow to prop your neck up so that it's in a neutral position, but it's actually not that important for this particular stretch. So you can also allow your head to just relax on the ground as much as possible. I want you to let this bottom arm just be totally relaxed, totally limp. And I want you to think about stacking your shoulders on top of each other. So I'm not rotating back, I'm not collapsing forward. Try to stack them vertically. And then go ahead and take a look at your hips as well. So you want to see that your hips are also stacked one on top of the other. And you're going for about a 90-degree angle at the hips and about a 90-degree angle at the knees as well. Okay, so we have our starting position. Let's go ahead and talk about the top arm. This is our most important part of the stretch, and this is what we were spending time setting up when we were looking at the anatomy a little bit. So you're thinking about flipping your pinky so that it's facing the top of your head, as if you were pushing up the ceiling, leading with this pinky side of the hand. So if I'm in a neutral hand position, I'm thinking about rotating so my pinky is facing the back of my head and the thumb is facing the front of my head. So I'm trying to get my hand flat on the floor. And so truth be told, you can already see my body popping off the floor. I just did a pretty intense lat workout and my lats are incredibly tight. And this is a perfect example of how these fascial chains and the muscles themselves can start to limit movement. We're living it in real time right now. So my lats are incredibly tight. Ideally, you'd like to get your palm on the ground in this position without your elbow collapsing forward. You really want that elbow to be back and reaching out towards the top of the head. If this is feeling uncomfortable in your wrist, if you're feeling a lot of fascial tension or pain through the forearm, or you're like me today and you can't get your lats to open up enough to get into the starting position, you can take a relaxed, soft fist on the ground, and that's already much better for me. So now I feel like I can be in this position, I can relax my body on the ground, and I'm not getting any pain or tension through the wrist, through the forearm, or through the entire sleeve of the arm. So you can do this. Now, if this also hurts your shoulder or your neck in any way, you can also very easily just extend your arm overhead, and that will be sufficient for the exercise as well. Okay, so we have our starting position. So now what are we going to do with our breath? Let me relax my arm for a minute and I'll explain it. So I want you to almost think about breaking it into 4 parts. You're going to do one long inhale. You're going to initiate in your belly. You're going to feel that one long inhale expand up into your ribs, expand up into your chest, travel through the armpit, through the arm, and think about your breath traveling out of that elbow, up, reaching out of the crown of the head. So you're thinking about the breath coming from the belly all the way up the side line of the body and reaching out through the elbow. So my elbow is reaching that way. And at the same time, I'm not allowing my hips to move at all. I'm really anchoring my pelvis down so I can get this stretch through the entire fascial chain that we were looking at when we were looking at those anatomy images. So remembering how your lats extend all the way down to your sacrum and all the way down into your legs, and remembering how the pecs also extend down the abdomen into the front of the pelvis. So we're allowing the pelvis to help us anchor the tissue so that we can stretch away from it. So that's our breath. It's sort of a 4-part breath of inhale belly, inhale ribs, inhale chest, inhale, reach out through the elbow. And now you want to try to maintain some of the length that you've created on your inhale while you allow the exhale to slowly release and you allow your body to melt onto the floor. Again, it's very gentle. You're not forcing anything. Before I demonstrate it for you once, I want to just talk about the pelvic position again. So you might be able to see from the other side of the camera, you want to really keep your lumbar spine and your sacrum in a neutral position. So your pelvis as neutral as possible. So watch for a second. I want to make sure I'm not hyperextending my low back and sticking my booty back, so we're not going into that anterior pelvic tilt. And I also am not trying to tuck as much as possible. I'm not tucking my tailbone, and I'm not going into a super posterior pelvic tilt either. I just want to find a neutral position where I feel a nice flat back from the lumbar spine to the sacrum, as if there was a wall right behind my back as a reference point and I was pushing into it. So I'm trying to have this really straight and pretty flat spine. So this does not move. No matter what I do with my arm, I'm not extending or flexing my pelvis. I want to maintain that anchored neutral pelvis as much as possible. So now just watch it once and then we'll do 4 of them together. So my pelvis is neutral. My hips are around 90. My knees are around 90. This bottom arm is totally relaxed, just reaching forward. You want to try to stack your shoulders as much as possible. Stack your hips as much as possible. Good. And then let your neck and head relax on the floor. Go ahead and find your arm position. So for me today, I'm going to take this soft fist. Remember not to let your elbow collapse and not to rotate too far open. And now just watch. I'm going to breathe into my belly, ribs, chest, reaching out through the elbow. I'm actively trying to push out through that elbow, and then I'm gonna try to maintain some of that length as I exhale slowly and completely through my nose. My pelvis is staying totally neutral. So go ahead and find your position. You can try with me. We'll do 4 of these together. If I don't talk so much, I can do it more easily, so feel free to watch. I'm gonna be a little bit more quiet. Here we go, breathing in through the belly. Exhaling out, keeping some of that length. 3 more breaths, breathing in through the belly. Feeling that breath travel all the way up the arm, out the elbow, reaching, creating some length. And then slowly exhale, try to maintain a little bit of that length you just created. So I'm still sort of reaching with my elbow even as my body relaxes. Let's do 2 more breaths like that. Inhaling through the belly, ribs, chest, elbow. Try to maintain some length as you exhale. Let your whole body relax back to the floor. Your pelvis is in neutral this whole time. 1 last breath on this side. I'm not going to talk, starting from the belly. Good, and slowly come out of this position. Let's go and transition to the other side. So, flipping sides. Let me make sure I'm still on camera. Okay, so now I'm lying on my right side. Good, and we have the same exact setup on this side. Let me back up a little bit. There you go. Okay, so we have the same exact setup on this side. So the bottom arm is just relaxed and limp, but I do want to try to stack my shoulders as much as possible, so I'm not opening up and I'm not collapsing forward. Try to stack the shoulders. Again, if this position is really uncomfortable on your cervical spine, go ahead and get a pillow and just get your head neutral with the rest of your spine. That's perfectly fine. And then let's take a look at the hips. So I want to try to get my hips stacked one on top of the other as well, bringing the hips to about 90 degrees and bringing the knees also to about 90 degrees. Let's look at the pelvis. So I'm not hyperextending and sticking my booty back, and I'm also not tucking and overly flexing and going into that posterior pelvic tilt. I'm trying to find as neutral of a spine as possible. So the sacrum and the lumbar spine should feel like one flat wall, as if I had a wall behind me that was my reference point that was keeping my spine straight. And I relax my head on the ground. And now let's take a look at this arm. Let's see if I have more mobility with my left arm today. So the position again is if I was cradling a baby or something, holding a baby. I'm gonna flip my hand so that my pinky is facing the back of my head and the thumb is facing the front of my head. And nope, I still cannot get my palm on the floor on this side. I'm gonna try one more time. It's not going to happen today. So again, if you're feeling any wrist tension or a lot of muscular tension like I am today, or you're feeling like just not that flexible, you can go ahead and come to a soft fist. Make sure you don't collapse in the wrist in either direction. Come to a soft fist, keep some integrity in the wrist. And you don't want your elbow to fall forward or fall open. You want to try to keep it as aligned as possible with the side of the body. Good. And again, if this is uncomfortable for you, you can also just reach the arm actively overhead. Okay, so I'm going to take my soft fist. And then one more time before we do it together, the breath is starting in the belly, moving to the ribs, moving up to the chest. And think about shooting it out of the elbow, creating some length. You're reaching the elbow in opposition of this anchored sacrum, this anchored pelvis. And then try to maintain a little bit of that length as you exhale through your nose. And you let your body relax onto the ground. So let's try 4 of those breaths together. I'm going to try to talk minimally. So here we go. Starting the breath in the belly. Ribs. Chest, elbow, reach out through the elbow. Maintain some of that length as you exhale slowly and gently through your nose. So it's very gentle, very subtle. And again, 3 more breaths. Inhale. Reach out through that elbow. Elbow reaches away from your sacrum. And exhale, try to maintain a little of that length. 2 more breaths and inhale. And exhale. Elbow is moving away from the sacrum. Pelvis is neutral. 1 last breath, inhaling from the belly. And exhale slowly through the nose. Let the whole body relax. Try to maintain some of that length. Good, and then gently let the arm come out of this position. Go ahead and push yourself up for a second. And let's come to a seated position. And let's just get a sense of how we feel. Maybe taking 1 breath in this neutral spine position. Good, and so just noticing any changes in your body, usually just from a few breaths in each of these positions, people tend to report back that they feel taller, they feel longer, they feel like they have more space in their spine, more space in their abdomen, like they can stand a little bit taller. I'm already feeling that a little bit, and in conjunction with other exercises, it really kind of solidifies that lengthening. And I also feel very relaxed in my nervous system, as I told you that we probably would. So just doing a quick check-in with yourself and seeing if you feel any of those things, or maybe you even feel something different. I hope you enjoyed this stretch today, and even though it was quite subtle, I hope you felt some kind of shift in your body or in your mind or maybe in your mood. Please leave me a comment and let me know what your experience was like. Next week, I want to regress backwards a little bit actually and have a conversation with you guys revisiting what it actually means to breathe functionally. And then in the following video, we'll start talking about the psychophysiological dimension of breathing, which I know is of great interest to many of you. Please like and subscribe, please share with your friends, and I'll see you next week.